Mike.
I'm Brad.
And this is Ministry Chemistry.
Neutron, proton, mass effect, lyrical oxidation, your irrelevant mass spectrograph, your electron volt, atomic energy erupting as I get all open on pow.
Here we go.
Welcome back to another episode of Ministry Chemistry. I almost messed up the title. It gets a little.
What were you gonna call it?
I don't ministry instead of ministry. It's like when someone
menace chemistry.
Yeah,
For some people, it might be.
Well, it's like when I meet someone and they ask for a glass of milk, and I'm like, "What is that?"
not
It's milk. It's with an I.
Milk.
Milk. Like they say it with an E almost. I have a dear friend who I love very much who loves milk.
Maybe she
Like
stopped being
milk.
friends with those people.
But I love them.
Yeah, of course my wife says plaza.
Instead of plaza?
Yeah.
How do you pronounce the word D-A-T-A?
Data?
Is it? Or is it
Data?
data?
I don't know. You say pecan or pecan?
Depends on where I am. Depends on what's socially acceptable in that area of the world, neck of the world.
So you're a conformist.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
what you're
absolutely. Yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm a follower. Of course. Sometimes I wish.
That's a good debate to have. Are followers of Jesus conformists? Be in the world, not of the world.
Right,
Renee.
but follow Jesus. So learn how to follow, submit, humility, those kind of things.
So you
If they
live
say
by
pecan,
the-
I say pecan.
Yeah, Renee lives by the I became all things to all people. You like that, don't you?
No. Yes.
Paul said.
Is it
I
pop,
said
soda, or
pecan.
Coke? It depends on where I am.
It's pop. Period.
Here.
Pop.
Soda pop. Pop.
Soda.
I have a good book
Pop.
you should read. I bought it for my wife when we got engaged. It's called Grits. How to Love Grits is what it's called.
Does she not like grits?
Gentleman Raised in the South.
Oh, yeah.
It's an acronym.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is the book good or is it just funny in title?
It's funny. It's like little quips, but one of them deals with this. Like, what does he call soft drinks? If he says pop, okay, soda, run for your life. If he says Coke, that's the man you want. And if he says sweet tea, scoop that man up and marry him. It's stuff like that.
Oh, that's like a good premarital counseling book to walk through with
Yeah,
somebody.
it was funny. Yeah, it was just kind of a joke gift when we got engaged.
Yeah.
But yeah, she liked it.
That's fantastic. And does she like grits?
No.
Do you like grits?
Actually, she likes grits if they're smothered in shrimp and sauce and cheddar cheese.
As they should be.
Shrimp and grits.
Bradley, do you like
Yeah.
grits?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. When they're good. Instant
Yeah.
stuff is.
Yeah.
My favorite is because I think grits get a little bit of a bad rap because they're misunderstood in the North, like because Northerners aren't, I don't know, whatever.
Misunderstood.
Yeah,
They
they're
have a
misunderstood.
complex.
The favorite picture of that is the Joe Pesci movie with Ralph Macchio and Marissa Tomei.
Karate Kid? Oh, my
Oh,
cousin,
my cousin
Benny.
Benny. Yes. It's like, what is a grit exactly?
My favorite is when you go out to eat with someone who's, that Southern Belle type gal, and they order grits, and I'm like, there it is. Like, that's how you know.
How do you order your grits?
Oh, I like them with butter.
And
I mean, I'll put a little salt in them, but
Ooh.
Brad?
I eat them a lot of different ways, but here in the North, I put a little jelly in them.
Ooh, jelly.
I don't get them up here.
Jelly.
I don't trust it.
You know who has
Just
good
like I don't
grits?
really order sweet tea up here. There's one place I'll try it from every now and then and see if they've, are worth it. But
Great place to get grits? Waffle House.
I would believe that.
Yeah.
You know what I've never had? I thought about this the other day. I don't know why. I've never eaten a waffle at a Waffle House.
What? Their pecan waffles are.
Pecan.
I don't know that I have either.
I go and get like short order like eggs
Smothered
and
and
hash browns.
covered.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
we
I've never had a waffle
through
from
college.
Waffle
Through
House.
college, we would go 2 a.m. to Waffle House and get a chili cheeseburger.
Oh yeah.
I like their
Cheeseburger, dump it.
patty melt.
I've never
Oh,
had a
patty melts
pancake
are
from
good.
IHOP either. But now we're gonna go veer into my breakfast preferences,
Yeah,
and
no,
those
it's
aren't
not.
fun. Yeah.
Everybody stop listening. So.
But
Yeah, that won't be fun.
Speaking of preferences,
Go for it, Mike. Take it and run with it, buddy.
I was trying to serve you up.
No, I love
was
it.
serving you up.
You
a
should just
spike
continue
there.
it. It's good.
Speaking of preferences,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking today about if you started a church.
Yeah.
If you started a church tomorrow, I guess, what would you build it around? What would be the
And a baptismal
But-
hot tub.
some of the questions come to mind. What would you build it around? obviously Jesus.
Obviously.
What general philosophy? What would be some of the like identifying marks of the church?
So here's why I love this conversation, because this is going to be fun for all of us to bat around. I think the majority of our listeners, this is an area of conversation.
Aren't thinking, what if I started a
Yeah,
church?
yeah, they're
tomorrow?
not.
Let me go do this.
So like this takes their brain into some imagination places, and maybe they get to consider, what do I find most important and vital about my church
Yeah.
and not.
Yeah, for sure.
But all of us have worked with church planters or read books by pastors who have planted a church and built a community of faith. And so like I know all the questions that I'm supposed to ask. I know all the things I'm supposed to have. But I want to play it out a little differently.
Well, so two things I have hope for in this conversation.
Okay.
For listeners in the ministerial world, you never know when God will call you to plant a church.
This is true.
So maybe it's something healthy to at least toy around with in your mind, what that might look like. And then for the people who are not that way, maybe you're in a church or in between churches, or maybe you don't go to church at all, and one day you'll be looking for a church. We live in an entertain me church culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my hope is that through this conversation and some of our ideas for what a church might look like if we were to start one tomorrow, might get those listeners thinking beyond that, what's the most entertaining aspect of church, and think deeper into what is the right church.
Well, just personally, I've been on a bit of a journey over the past year. So it was close to a year ago, about 11 months ago, I stepped out of a church that I'd been a part of for a number of years. All was well, no hard heart, no bitterness. It was just time for me to step out and for a new leader to be in that space. And what I had to do, though, for me was really consider, where am I going to go now?
Yeah.
What kind of church community am I going to get involved with? Now, the church I was a part of, I was welcome to continue on there. But for me, it was a good wrestling and consideration of maybe I need some time. And also, I want to kind of look into being a part of a different sort of community for a little while and see what that might be like. So I've loved walking through Acts and looking at the early church and considering components that are important. Not only what should a church be for me, but what should I be for a church? Because that's another piece of this whole puzzle. Yeah. All three of us have served on a staff, either as a volunteer or as a paid staff. And it's different when we use the phrase, don't see behind the curtain. Right?
Yeah.
And we are a part of the congregation in a different way. And so what am I supposed to be in a church is also a question that I've had to weigh.
So
just to know that.
So I say throw to Brad first.
All right, I love that idea. I love throwing to Brad first. He loves it too.
I do.
No, is this something that you've even thought about? Like, if God called me to plant a church tomorrow, obviously it's not going to happen that quick, but
Right.
Don't limit God.
well, I'm not saying that. I'm not.
He might.
No, I'm not
Brad
saying.
eats ice
He
cream
might,
for dessert
and I might not
tonight.
hear it.
Well,
Falls asleep, wakes up, and goes, "Honey,
well,
I had a dream like Joseph."
Well, the reality is, if God called any one of us to plant a church tomorrow, it would probably take a year to actually see that through to fruition.
Because we live here, or because you think that's the case anywhere?
No, I don't think God is as instantaneous as we would sometimes like him to be or think him to be.
Really?
Yeah, I think there's more of a.
That's an interesting conversation.
I think there's more of a preparation, heart process that maybe we don't even realize until it actually starts to play out.
What if you're in it?
Yeah. What if you're in the midst of it? It's been happening all along, and just the verbalization of said planting puts you. I'm like, it's going to be next week. Next week we're going to have a church someplace.
Well, maybe I'm more pragmatic than that. So
You?
listen, I might be a big visionary, but I'm pretty pragmatic.
We
when it
need to
comes
slow
right
our
down.
roll with my own vision and talk about it.
So, what are some things that would stand out to you as most important if you started a church?
Well, it starts and ends with the gospel.
Well, duh. Quit giving me that Christianese answer. Jeez, you both are going, well, I want to build my church around Jesus. Well, I hope so. If we're not Muslim.
Yeah, Mike,
or,
we do.
Jews.
I don't think you should
Yeah,
bash
we are
Brad. You
good
put him on the
around
spot
Jesus.
Throw it
first.
to me and then
Bash his
rub
first
it in my
answer.
face.
Gosh.
Good thing you're a pilot, not a teacher.
Okay. All right. Let me rephrase the question.
Okay, great. Be a better question
What
asker.
does it look like to build a church around Jesus?
Oh. Now that is a different
That
question.
is a different question. One that I have to think about for a moment.
So I agree with Brad. I'll take it for a little bit. I agree with Brad that it needs to be Jesus-centric and gospel-focused.
Well, I
But
hope you agree with
But
that.
listen, stop interrupting. It starts with people. A church starts with people. Because if you don't have people, you won't have a church. Right? Bride of Christ is comprised of his children. And so,
So when my journey to become a pastor was long and arduous and winding, but when I took over here with the youth, our pastor came to me and he knew I was trying to wrap my head around the role as well, and he said, just do two things: preach the word and love the people. And it doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be all these
grandiose bells
Yeah.
and whistles.
It's you need to do those two things. You take the word, give it to the people, and love the people the way we're called to love them in the word.
Friends of mine are connected to the church they are now because the first Sunday and the second Sunday that they went, they met people that they connected with and connected with them. You have friends craving community in their church, right? So it's a people who are hungry for an understanding of what it's like to live this life differently. And we get to say, hey, come be a part of these conversations and this time together where we're studying that, we're learning that together, and then we're going out and doing it. And we are helping each other, holding each other accountable in that, not in a finger-wagging way, but in a, man, I don't know how to approach this, or, gosh, I think I really flubbed this up. What do you think? So I think it starts with people. And I think a lot of times people go, well, you need a place. That's the first thing you need. I don't think so.
No.
My living room is a
Well,
place.
I would say if you're going to build community, you need some kind of place. Now, can that happen in your living room, around your dining room
Right.
table, around, a coffee shop? Sure. But I think we all agree, and even people, and maybe there's people listening that don't go to church on a Sunday morning or any time of week. Their churches maybe listen to this podcast or listening to, a sermon online, and they would probably agree, community doesn't happen in isolation. It's got to be like a face-to-face gathering.
Absolutely.
Where we can not just mentally and verbally, but there's a physical connection there that's maybe inexplicable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you've got to want to go. There are people in my life I'm close with, and we all walk with Jesus. And there's a missing of them that if I'm not in their presence every so often, it's hard on my heart. And I'll say that, my heart needs to see you. 'Cause you're a person in my life that I'm in community with, and that there's a stronger bond here than just, oh, we're friends, yada, yada, yada. It's Jesus connects us, and there's something bigger here than we might even be able to put words around, but I need you in my life. And so I think people are important. And that's in the early church in Acts. What drew people to the early church was, gosh, they share a connection and a community in a way that I can't find anywhere else. I don't know what that is.
So you guys have both given answers. So poking fun at me. Jesus and people, which is essentially the holy matrimony of the church,
Yep.
right? Jesus, the groom, and the church, the people, not the building, the church, his bride. That's the holy matrimony. So when I think about that, I think of, and I think about Acts in the early church. I think about 3 C's that I would build the church upon:
Okay.
communion, community, and compassion. And
Somebody's thought about this.
Well, I've listened to some people that I respect a lot, and they've talked about one essential element that they would build their church around, and that's communion.
Yeah, say more words about that.
Well, that's something that I've been wrestling with, and I would love to talk to one of those people like face to face and be like, hey, what does that look like? You know, how did that thought develop in your mind? How would that play out in real time? So I think we've talked about either privately or on the show, you know, how much is too much, how much is not enough, the celebrating of communion, of breaking bread. And I think the basic concept of those things celebrate the holy matrimony of the church. They celebrate the death and resurrection, the redemptiveness of Christ, while also celebrating the community that happens in gathering around that table together. So you're bringing those two things together. You're remarrying Christ and the church through the act of communion, but you're also centralizing Jesus and the people through the partaking of that.
And then the response, the outgoing, is the compassion.
Yeah, there's just, I don't know, there's just something beautiful about that.
Yeah.
You know?
See, and here I thought he was going to be like, I want fun. Like, I think it should be fun. Because I do think it should be enjoyable, right?
Well,
but you went real serious.
Are those two things the same?
Mutually.
Fun and enjoyment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
That's a serious question.
I know it
I'm
is.
I'm not joking about that. Because
Says the guy who always picks on me for semantics.
yeah, I'm not though. I'm not joking about that at all because I think those things get confused.
Yeah.
Especially in a worship setting. Like we talked earlier, breakfast. There was a moment during our worship service yesterday that was silence.
For a long time.
And that silence was a joyful noise because it was a community of people focused on the needs of one individual, if only for a few moments. And that became a joyful noise. There's nothing fun about that. There's nothing fun about sitting in silence.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it was powerful. It was a joyful noise. I can't say that enough. I've said it several times. But that's what I mean about the church. And fun and enjoyable may not be the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think what I then would choose is enjoyment. When you say it like that. And enjoyment encompasses fun, but it encompasses other things too.
Yeah.
Because we're getting ready to, we have a group of middle schoolers, but we don't really have a quote unquote middle school ministry in the church I'm a part of. And it's interesting because it's this fresh take. Like, we don't have anything specific for them. And the thing I don't want to do is create only what we know to be a quote unquote middle school ministry. And so in rallying these team of leaders together, I want to even talk about it differently. Like, what's the purpose of why we'd even get these kids together outside of what we already do as a church? And
Jesus.
no, that's what we do as a church. But like, and then even getting them together.
Oh, well, now we're semantics. You said that's what we do as a church. Are the middle schoolers not the church?
No, you're twisting it. You're acting as though we need to do Jesus differently for middle schoolers. And that's not what I'm saying.
We don't?
That's not the point of the conversation. But you can keep interrupting. I'm sure our listeners love it. Because we're starting this ministry.
Renee is not mad, everyone. It's
no,
okay.
it's not. No. But we're starting this, and it's a real thoughtfulness as to why. Why do we even need to separate them, or should we separate them, or for what purpose? And I think similarly, when we start a church plan, or we start talking about starting a new church, why do we need to, because if we're all a part of a body of believers currently, why would we even need to separate from that current body to start something new? And that's a question before we even get to components of it. Do we not think, so for instance, with your 3 C's, is your current body not doing communion well, community well, or compassion well? You know, is there a lack of those, and you believe biblically that they need to be stronger in a body? Or do you see a group of people in need of that more so than any church around you can provide? like I'm a fan of new churches because I think you draw in new people because of interest and intrigue. But there is a question of why aren't current churches sufficing in that, which takes us in a different direction as well.
Not really. Did you have something to add? Brad's just contemplatively shaking his head right now. No. There, statistically speaking, new churches, the word that keeps popping in my head is recruit, and that's a terrible word to use. New churches bring about more new believers than current churches do, statistically speaking. And based on what you're saying, I've wrestled with that, with the why of that. And the only thing that I've come up with is new churches, just by default, just by the default of being new, have to be more innovative. And current churches, there's a complacency where innovation gets kind of pushed to the back burner. And that's the only reason that I've come up with.
Does it get pushed to the back burner, or do we just get stuck in dogmatic thinking where we have to keep doing this because the people that we have expect this?
Well, their faith is sustained. And let me not do that. Let me not do a they and us. Our faith is sustained by certain elements that we connect with God and have and habitually connected with God through. So if you take those away, then how will my faith be sustained in some regard? How will my community be sustained if you take this away?
Oh my goodness.
Right? Instead of saying, oh, that's just a new way to be in community. It is a very self way of thinking.
How on earth would my faith grow and continue if my group of people didn't do something this way?
Right.
Why would I take personal responsibility to continue growth in those aspects?
Well, and I think it's easy for us to say, like, let's call out like a rummage sale or a winter retreat.
Inside the church.
Or, right, like
Let's
all
turn
the
over
things
some
that we do,
tables.
insider things, like the potluck that we always have on Labor Day or whatever it is. And yet, why would we expect something different from a people when every Sunday they walk into a greeting, announcements, 3 songs, an offering, a sermon, a closing song, and a postlude? Habitually, every week we do the same thing. And yet when it comes to events that we get irritated about because they're not innovative, we think the people are going to change because we're not going to do the same thing again. But we've set the culture like that. So in planting a new church, my hope would be the culture would be, hey, things might change from week to week, and that's okay. And you're just going to have to get used to that because that's what we do around here because we're trying to make sure we're invitational to new people and not so insider focused. But eventually, don't you become insider focused to some degree?
Do you have to?
I don't know. I
Well,
don't
it's
think
because
so.
that's the culture you set up. If you have a culture that's set up and almost expects change, I don't know if I've talked about it on here or not, but for probably 4 months this past year, in our youth room, I set up the chairs different every week for 4 months. And every week when the kids walked in, it was like, oh, what is this? But I wanted to do it because they're little changes that really have no impact on anything other than the fact that they get used to change. And so when a bigger change needed to happen, it wouldn't melt down the entire group. They just got used to, hey, something's going to be different this week. I don't know what it is. And they were more receptive to bigger changes because there were little changes every week.
And I'm not just going for the structural consistency of the environment. I'm going for something different. I don't care about chairs. I don't care about format, right?
The format might be the same.
Right.
However, there is something that's different.
Yeah.
So
It's a cultural change. So if I'm creating a church tomorrow, I want to set a cultural tone that's for longevity of continuing to bring in new people. Because to your point, why do new churches have those better opportunities? I know that now. So what can I do to create a church that when it's an old church, it still has those possibilities?
Well, the 3 C's that I mentioned, there's nothing innovative about those.
Right.
I mean, they're threaded throughout the entire Bible, not just the book of Acts. I mean, that's the Exodus, the Israelite community was founded on those 3 C's, but I think how we do those, and we see that within Scripture as well. The picture of those 3 C's from in the Old Testament to the New Testament is different, even within the Old Testament and the New Testament and the different communities that Paul was evangelizing. There we see differences in how those 3 C's played out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not necessarily like the core of what we do. It's how we implement those things into the church life that matters, that forces us. I mean, the church should really be constantly reinventing itself in how those 3 things, and probably many other things. Those are just the 3 things that I mentioned, but and how those 3 things weave themselves into the body and the life of the church.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say is the hope of any believer is to meet other folks that they can invite into this journey, right? We can call it evangelism. We can call it you're trying to save them, which we can't do. The Holy Spirit alone can do. But you want other people to know because you believe God is God and God is who he says he is. And so it's the invitational aspect of a church that makes all the difference. And I've walked with a couple different friends in different pastoral settings where I just ask them, who are your people engaged with outside of these walls? And is your church a place they want to invite their non-church friends to?
I would add another question to that.
Yeah.
Why do they want to invite them?
Yeah.
I got invited to a church by some coworkers, and their invitation was, hey, you should come to our church. The music's awesome, and we give away $5 Starbucks gift cards. And I got it. That was a turnoff for me.
Okay.
And that is something that we're talking about if I planted a church.
Sure.
That's something that I would probably think intentional about is, are people inviting, like you said, but why? Why are they inviting people to be a part of this
And is
community?
it a place they can invite to? Because, if a church leadership, established church leadership is going, we're not growing, my first question is, well, who are your people in community with? Because I don't think it's a pastoral responsibility to lead the charge of growth. It's the people who are saying, you can't not be a part of this. I can't not be a part of this. I'd love for you to check it out and us talk about it. And
it definitely needs to grow on itself.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that invitation happens, though, from the people who just wear that on a daily basis.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? They just leave their church like they can't. It's not forced. Invitation is not forced. It just happens because just in daily conversation with a friend over coffee, it's like, talking about what you experienced at church in a good way.
Yeah.
In a holistic way.
But you know what that means? You've got to be in places
Yeah.
outside of your church community where you can have those conversations. When I worked in a school district, there's a lunch hour. All teachers get a lunch hour, and you have a break room, and we'd get into crazy conversations about all kinds of stuff because we all had this 25 minutes to eat our lunch and then go back to students in our offices and whatnot. But we had this space to talk about it. How many people work in cubicles or situations where they go out for lunch or they lunch on their own because they're tired of the people around them, and then they go home at night to the family who already knows Jesus, and really their neighbors, do they really know them? And if they do, are they already involved in a church? All those things. Like, are you even in spaces to be able to say, my life's different because of my church. Can I tell you about it?
And maybe that takes more intentionality.
Yeah.
And leads us into a whole nother conversation, which we're going to cover one day, which is secular ministers. Someday in the future, but not today. Today we're going to leave you with this. Here's a definition of church that I really love. Church should be like this, right? A safe place for hard questions and hard life and real friends and ordinary folks looking for Jesus. What do you think about that? What do you look for in a church? And if you got a word from God tonight that said, tomorrow, start a church, build it on me, What would that look like for you? For Ministry Chemistry, I'm Renee.
Still Mike.
And Brad.
We'll talk to you next time.